50% of CRM implementations fail. So if that's the starting point, the question is why?
This is the Built Happily podcast, where we dive into building apps, companies, and relationships in the HubSpot ecosystem.
As HubSpot grows, so does the opportunity, and we put you in the room with the people making it all happen.
So today's episode of Built Happily, we have Brendan Tolleson of RP, aka RevPartners.
Brendan tells us the story of how they grew to an elite partner in less than 2 years and the lessons they learned doing that, the start of the Hubolution, and how your CRM is a product, not a project. All that and more on this episode of the Built Happily podcast.
Look, we're humans here, man. Brendan, we're humans. Happy to have you here on Built Happily. You've built a couple dope things in the ecosystem. I've heard of them. I think on my day 2 of understanding HubSpot, RevPartners was one of the first things that I saw. So Brendan Tolleson from RevPartners, what's going on today, man?
Guys, I'm excited to be here. I've been anxious to join this podcast. So big fans of what you guys are doing at Hapily. So gosh, Max and Dax, I don't know if you guys have a way to describe it, but it's a powerhouse here. I'm excited to be a part of it.
It's the only reason I got hired, because it rhymed.
In the stars.
Your background is fire, Dax. I need to improve mine. I'm like in this basement cellar with no light. It's pretty depressing over here.
Hey, man, you got the neon, you got the wall art. It's happening. Just one strip. I'm looking at a little strip right here. That's about all I'm working with.
Have you ever the old going to Applebee's? Oh gosh, wow. Me using Applebee's. Don't judge me on Applebee's, but
no judgment here. Big fan. Not at all. When you're here, you're family, as they say.
Yeah. So when you go in those places, it's really dark, and then they have the neon signs. That's what it's supposed to be, but in here, it's just so bright you don't see anything, which I'm tempted to put on for you guys, but I don't think it'll be very effective.
That's all good. We didn't need anything else, but so man, RevPartners, you guys are mega. First of all, I want to know the name. Where did the name come from?
Oh gosh, I wish I had a good story for that. It's not a really good one. I think Matt Boley and I. So Matt's the other co-founder in RP, and the name was actually probably one of the things we spent the least amount of time on. And I think it was Revenue Partners is where we started, and we tried 5 different ones. And I think, as you guys know, trying to find a domain is not easy. Oh. And so it was not. I wish I had a great sexy story for that, but it was not a lot of thought put into it. It was more about. I would say more about the logo. How do we get the logo to look good versus what the name is?
Sure. We know we want a green R. What can we do?
Well, that's the thing. Matt and I were very adamant, and I think I just lost this battle, is that it's actually supposed to be an R and a P. If you look at, you see there's this little gap here. It's supposed to be.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah. No one really sees it, so I'm giving up that battle. But that was the original intent. But
I love it, dude. So take us, we're going to Quentin Tarantino this, right? And start with the today. So before we get into how you built it, right, and the story there, lessons learned, all that kind of stuff, why don't you give folks listening right now the state of the union of RevPartners? Where are you guys at today? What are you excited about for the future?
Gosh, so in terms of people, we're about 70 people. So we've gone from 2 to 70 in about 3 years, which has been a lot of growth in a short period of time. There's a lot, to your point, we can talk about lessons learned.
Oh yeah.
That's where we're at right now. In terms of revenue, we're just shy of 10 million. So that's where we're at current state. In terms of what there's a lot that I'm excited about. I would say it's been I don't know how it is, has it been for a lot of the partners in the ecosystem, but you're candidly speaking, Q1's been choppy. I would say. And so it's been I say, if you ask me right now, it's hey, we're going through some kind of choppy waters, but I think overarching statement would be, I'm very optimistic about the ecosystem, where the market is headed, and what's in front of us.
I want to dig into that. Because we always like to I think everyone's challenges, depending on their size and the space that they play in the HubSpot universe, the challenges vary. And so when you say choppy, what's causing the choppiness, right? Or what are you seeing in terms of choppiness? And is there anything you've pulled out of there in terms of lessons in dealing with it and adjustments you're making?
Gosh, I'm working through a lot of those, to be honest with you. But I think the trends that we've seen are, I think from a new bookings and from a retention perspective, I think we've missed, I know we've missed our target on both of those in Q1. And so I think as it relates to what's happening, I do think there's an element that you even hear from HubSpot and probably a lot of the partners are experiencing, which is the role of the CFO in terms of power has gotten demonstratively more powerful, it's redundant, but that seat has more power than they ever had before. And so
Mhm.
when you get into larger type of engagements, the sales cycle increases. You have more people, more stakeholders, and the closing time has just increased. So I think that's been a big component of it for sure. And I think also within other elements, because HubSpot is a source for a lot of partners, when you get into closing deals and they're motivated to close deals, you have a race to the bottom. And so when you have on the high end, you have really long sales cycles. And then on kind of the more transactional side, you have this race to the bottom. It creates a really tough dynamic. So I think for a lot of partners, they're trying to navigate, what do I do? Because up market is really long and there are fewer deals. And on the down market, it's just really competitive and it's just all about lowering prices. So I don't know how that sits with a lot of partners, but I think that that's a reality that's going on in the market right now.
What are some of the things that you guys have done to try to combat that? Is there anything that you're seeing that's like shifting that tide in the other direction, or is it a lot of experimenting still? Or
Yeah, I think there's a few things. For us, what we've always communicated is you need to have a point of view. And if you
Mm,
don't have a point of view, then you are going to be a commodity. And as people look for the cheapest option from an implementation perspective, you will bleed. So I would caution people that if they just want to be known as a HubSpot implementation partner and no marketing hub or sales hub, and they don't have a methodology or framework by which to engage in that, then they're going to have a really tough time. So that's on one side. Then I think getting the other element when we talk about upmarket, I think you need to have solution-based offers. And so how do you create recurring impact, recurring value? You need to know what you're good at. And so we think about HubSpot as a customer. And so we need to know where HubSpot's going, not only in terms of upmarket, but also from an industry focus so that we can start creating solutions that facilitate that. So historically, RP has done really well in B2B SaaS and technology. If you think about the bell curve, it was about 60%, actually more than that, about 70% of our customer base. Well, B2B SaaS has gotten destroyed is a strong word, but they have been impacted by the economy. And so there's been a slowdown
they're in
on
the
that
choppy
side.
waters too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that impacted us in terms of, okay, so we need to make sure we diversify. We figure out other industries where we can have a point of view and create solutions for. And so if you look at that kind of industry mix now, we also go where HubSpot goes. So we're seeing a lot in supply chain, manufacturing, distribution, as an example, and getting into like non-food franchises. And that can cover a lot of different industries. But it's been exciting to see that diversification because it allows us to have more entry points into the market.
No, I kind of
So,
feel I
oh, good.
understand that, man, because when we sell software, and when we think of software, I always say software should have an attitude, right? It can't just be something that's there, kind of whistling. You need to use it, and it needs to have an attitude. Windows is really good at that. When you click something that you're not supposed to, dunk, 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 like it knows you need to do it this way. And when people come to you for looking for solutions, they don't want to be like, oh, well, you could do it this way or you could do it that way. Then now again, you're a commodity. You need to be like, this is how we do it. This is why we're successful and why you should be successful too. And this is the game. They're like, man, I want to work with you. So I'll definitely understand that.
Yeah, we have a one of our initiatives this year. So we build out a mural board every year and talk about, hey, here are the priorities of the business. And one of our pillars is on trust. And so how do we create trust? And so one of the statements is earn the right to challenge. And so
Mm,
like we're paid, kind of where you're going, Dax. Like we're as a solutions provider, like we're paid to have an opinion. And so we're not to be reactive. We're not to say, what do you want? It's no, hey, you're paying us to tell you what to do. And here's why. And so we kind of balance that of, yes, we need to listen to the customer, but also they are looking for us to provide guidance. And that's
yeah.
strategic insight and implementation work. So
Oh, yeah.
that's a really big one for us.
You're giving me flashbacks to my implementation days because there was always the route you could go where whatever sort of ideas you heard the customer wanted to accomplish, you could either say, yeah, sure, let's build it, even though in the background it's not such a great idea. And so one of the things that I learned very quickly is you're paying for your expertise, and sometimes that expertise means to tell them they're making a bad idea or they're doing the wrong thing. You would suggest to do it differently, and it took me a long time to get over that and just be like, listen, even if you're challenging them or maybe saying, hey, this approach isn't necessarily going to work and because of XYZ, you're really doing right by them. Like when you learn how to challenge them like in effective ways. So it was just, I felt it back to where it all began. Speaking of where it all began, let's talk about you, right? Talk to us
Nice.
about
That
your
was a nice
time.
transition, Max. Like I feel like you've done this
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. It's almost as if I planned it. I didn't actually. I just happened to say back to all beginning. I was like, yeah, let's do it. But thank you. Let's go back to the beginning, right? So here's where the Tarantino comes in, right? Going back to before you started RP, like how did you even get into HubSpot land in the first place?
By accident. is the short
Oh.
answer. So
That's the correct answer, actually.
yeah, I look.
You slipped and fell, and all of a sudden,
Yeah, no, like well, actually, so I do a becoming RPer. I do 3 sessions for every new RPer, and the first one is the origin story of RP. And what I tell every RPer is, it's not a romantic story. So it wasn't like I had this great idea and let's build this great company. That's not where RP started. RP actually started out of brokenness, and really what I mean by that is, if you go back to March of 2020 when COVID hit, I was serving as a head of sales and marketing. So think like a CRO, and I was running a tech-enabled services company, and they were looking to go from 3 million to 25 million. And I had been there for we'd grown to 140% year over year. So we're on track based off of what we said we're going to do. I built out the people, so built out a 4-person sales team, built out a marketing team, SDR team, and actually ripped out HubSpot, brought in Salesforce. And so that was what I was doing. My background is in B2B SaaS from the revenue side, from an SDR to an executive. So I was doing that on the services side. Third week of March, the world shuts down. I get a call from the CEO, and he says, "Hey, I have to let you go." And so I lost my job, and then I got the tuition bill for my oldest child the same week. So not a fun week, to say the least.
Nope.
And so that's actually the origin story of RP. So that's why I say it's not romantic. It was by accident. And so from there, it was, what the heck do I do? I don't have time to wait. But no one was hiring, if you recall, back in the beginning of COVID.
Yeah, it was a
So
little choppy, you could
yeah,
say.
just a little bit. So people may think right now it's bad. Think about when COVID and everything shut, it was sucked. And
Tidal
so
wavy, in fact. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I can go into all the different details, but that's where it started. And I started
Yep.
getting approached by people. I was like, hey, I'll just do this to bridge the gap, do some contract type work. And at the same time, I met Matt. So Matt Bloin, the co-founder. Matt was actually, he and I originally met at a wedding that he crashed, by the way. Whole other story. And then
We'll
we
get
just
him
started
on
talking about,
next so he can tell his side.
yeah, bring him on and get his opinion on it. Yeah, and actually, the groom would also have an opinion, so we should maybe have a podcast on that topic. But yeah, so he and I met, and we started talking about, well, what would it look like to build a company a little bit differently than what we experienced? And really, all I mean by that is, how do we build a company with excellence and care? And so, how do we hold both of those together? It's an and statement, not an or statement. So it's not binary. Can we really strive to do both well? Doesn't mean we'll hit it perfectly, but that's what we want to achieve. So that's like the
Yeah.
intent. And then it was like, well, what can we do? And we saw this need in the market around revenue operations. And so that's where it started, because RevOps at the time was, everyone talks about RevOps now, but
Yep.
3.5 years ago, or every time, it was not a known word. And so we just said, hey, let's pursue this category. And then to your question about HubSpot, we are recovering Salesforce addicts. And so we thought we would do Salesforce, but we said, hey, that's too oversaturated. We need to find a different market. Like, where's a market headed that we can actually build a whole service line around a platform? And we didn't look at HubSpot at first. We actually went to ActiveCampaign, which, believe it or not, I shouldn't say. Let's just say it's not a scalable solution. And so we
Matic.
said we got to rip that out. And then we started working with another customer at the very beginning that had HubSpot. And we said, oh, wow, this actually could be something we could build a business around. So we stumbled into it, is the short. I got back to your question, but that's ultimately how we got to HubSpot.
Love it.
you got the accident right. Same thing with us with Apchemist was, somebody had HubSpot, and we just saw that there was something that was going on. It was a little early days. No one had
Yeah.
built well yet, so we tried to build a well.
Yeah. Can you dive into that like inflection point where, because it started like you guys working together, you wanted to build something, right? And then you saw the market, right? You started with ActiveCampaign. Dude, where was it where we want to go all in on HubSpot bulb clicked? And maybe it wasn't one moment in time or a series of events, or tell us what made you go all in on the HubSpot side of things.
Well, we definitely knew ActiveCampaign was a disaster, so we knew we had to get out of that. So that was an easy one. Sorry, ActiveCampaign. And then I would say this is still 2020. So we signed our partnership with HubSpot, I think it was December 22nd of 2020. We still at the time had HubSpot customers, and we had some Salesforce customers. And we were small guys. This is just Matt and I at the time. And so it was like, we got to say yes to anything we can get. So because when you're in the early phases, you pretty much say yes. And so we still had some Salesforce customers, because a lot of our lead generation and a lot of my network is in B2B SaaS, and specifically within the VCPE networks. And if you are a B2B SaaS company that has VC money behind it, 90% of those companies have Salesforce. And so we were saying yes to those because we had the understanding, the skill set, and the competency to manage that CRM. And so we were running HubSpot and Salesforce. And then it was one of those moments, I think, starting in, it's probably Q2 of 2021, where we just said, hey, look, if we really want to be able to scale, then we need to have going back to that point of view concept, but also standardize. And so we just said we're going to say no to Salesforce, which was a really scary at the time was
Yeah.
very scary, and just said we are going to build playbooks and process on one system so that we can train people and we can bring people on that will understand this, all the playbooks that we built out.
Yeah, there was an interesting point you made there where you guys made this decision to standardize and decide, hey, we're going to build on this one platform. What were some of the difficulties that were hindering you taking the both Salesforce and HubSpot approach, right? That made you go, we should really just focus on this one platform, right? Because you see a lot of HubSpot agencies out there doing both, right? And what I'm wondering there is there certain things that maybe they've been noticing but didn't understand it was like a symptom of a problem, like we talk about with inbound all the time, right? Of that approach, right? Of doing both HubSpot and Salesforce. And maybe it might make sense for you to just focus on this. What were you guys seeing that kind of led to that decision?
I can't take credit for that. That was more Andrew Biden, who's our COO, deserves credit for it because I like to grow. I like to sell, and so slowing down to speed up is not a fun concept for me. But yeah, I think for him it was all about, hey guys, we got to focus. Every yes is a no, and as we think about how am I going to build this delivery department that I can truly train and create efficiencies and leverage, you got to start saying no to these deals. And so we just it took some discipline of just saying, hey, I believe that I believe you and I'm going to trust you because I've empowered you to build our delivery team. And if that's what you're asking for, then I'm going to honor that and figure out how do I create demand for HubSpot customers. And so there's the push and pull, of course, like operations versus sales, and ultimately we need to understand what the market wants and tell like delivery what they need to create. But there is an element of empowerment of us working together to say, hey, what's best for the business. So that's
Yeah.
where we were at the time, and then it was all about, okay, once we made that decision, how do we figure out how to drive demand? And I think you build trust with the customer or the market when you have a clear point of view. What we found is, and what we challenge a lot of partners is, what we hate is when people say they don't have an opinion. Going back to what we talked about earlier, it's, no, you're not agnostic. You're saying you're agnostic, but you truly do have an opinion, and you do have a belief on what's right and what's the best tool. And so you might as well be bold and say what the heck you think. And so that was a lot of what kind of gets into how we grew. But it was really around that of, we're not going to be quiet. We're going to have a point of view and we're going to share it.
There, yeah, that's one of those things where people, I would say, people like myself, the cancers of the world, not the disease, but the sign, is it's like, what do you want to eat? I'm just happy to be able to breathe and have food.
Yeah.
But that mentality works in our daily human lives. But when you're talking about, I want to grow business, I have a goal, what should I do? Hey, you should do something. No one pays for that is the key. But speaking of paying, you're an elite partner. 2 years.
15
I won't
months.
say how you did it because I know how you
Oh,
did
there
it.
you
A bunch of revenue and managed a bunch of revenue, and then all of a sudden you got the crown. But I would say, what was one of the best lessons you learned from doing it so quickly? Because you have 70, that's 70 people that your lives are dependent on upon you and Matt. So what was the best lesson that you learned in that kind of trajectory that you did in a couple of years?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's just 70 people. I mean, it's their families too. You think about the amount of souls that, or soul, maybe that's a too spiritual word, but the amount of
True. It's true.
people that we are impacting. So for any partner that's listening to this, some of it I would say take it with a grain of salt because 3 years ago is very different than it is now. So just a caveat what I'm about to say. Man, I think, look, we were very fortunate from a timing perspective. When you go, yes, we've executed well, but timing plays a huge role in that. So if you go back 3 years, HubSpot looks very different. HubSpot was still very much a marketing automation tool, and they wanted to become, as you guys know, this smart CRM. So the CRM platform for scaling companies, and going from a product to a platform is a very different proposition. And when you look at the ecosystem back then, for the vast majority, I'd say probably with the exception of an Up-to-Date, which you guys know, it was 99.9% marketing agencies. And so when we saw the market, we said, hey, there's this opportunity where HubSpot's looking to go. It requires a different type of partner that's more of a systems integrator that can do migration, configuration, and ongoing administration. And when we think about what RevOps can unlock for companies, it really fits all that narrative. Yes, it's lead to cash in terms of scope, but the skill set and the competency that's required to help companies get off of legacy platform like Salesforce to HubSpot is just very different than a marketing agency. And so we really focused on that narrative. And so that allowed us to get a lot of traction in the market, but also with HubSpot as it relates to like a top down perspective, but also at the rep level. And so my background, I told you it's in B2B SaaS, but my background is specifically in how to create channels. And so you always think about the direct sales team, but there's this whole partnership team. And oftentimes partnership teams get criticized because it's usually you just do a lot of meetings. But if you do partnerships well, which is really the buzzword you hear in the market right now, it's a really cost-effective vehicle. And so we just executed that part of it really well. And then what we also did was we talked about this earlier, like we were really loud. And so it can be polarizing in a lot of ways, but it creates awareness and attention. And so
Yeah.
we just thought about a different way about how do you go to market, both in terms of the partnership side, but from a marketing side. And so we
Yeah.
thought about well, I'll pause there. Or do you have a question or should I keep going?
Well, I wanted to dig in on that very loud. I think that's something that's so great about your team and like the presence that, you know, a lot of folks at RP kind of command, if you will, on LinkedIn is something very special. You guys are heavily involved in the community. You guys are talking to folks very publicly in all kinds of different ways. And I think that's something that a lot of partners should admire in terms of having an extremely engaged workforce, right? And that it's actively being part of the community, right? What do you guys do to like enable that, empower that, encourage that? Is that very intentional? Or are you just hiring folks that are very charismatic and love interacting with the community? Is it like what sort of things or tactics do you deploy to really encourage that extremely positive behavior with the community?
Well, I'm glad you've experienced it that way. And so I think that, look, yeah, if you look at our page, I think we're just shy of 9,000 followers on LinkedIn. That's not through, hey, go find somebody in, in a different country to follow us. That's
Yeah.
all really organic. And I
Yeah.
think we're in the top 5 in the ecosystem for followers, which we're proud of. But I think it gets more to your point, how we actually done that.
Yeah.
Look, I think that the marketing world has shifted. And I would encourage well, whether you're a partner or I don't know who's listening to this, but the old world is you rely on a marketing department to create and distribute content. The new world has really shifted because you're seeing trust shift. Trust has shifted from brands to the people that are actually performing the work. And so if you want to create that authentic voice, then you need to have the people that are performing it getting their voice out. And so, yes, we've created a whole creator community that has unlocked that. Now, there are things I wish we were doing more of, but I would say we are definitely making strides for that to happen. And so that has been a big part of it, Max, of how we've been able to be successful. And some of those voices, I'm sure we'll talk about them later. That's a
Yeah.
lot of what we focused on is how do we unlock our people and give them a platform and give them a voice by which to be heard. And so there's a lot we've learned through that, but that's the big idea. And so we actually thought about this today. I don't know how it's going to resonate, but I was talking to our team and I said, "Hey, think about how we create demand. Think about it like a newspaper." And I know newspaper is old school, which sounds weird, but the way I would think about it is you have like op-ed pieces, you have articles, and you have the editor. And for
Mhm.
us, like our creators, our peers who do the work, they should be the op-ed. They're the ones that actually have an opinion on whatever the set topic is. Then the articles is really your traditional marketing. And so they're the ones capturing, hey, what are the headlines and just making sure that it's more information sharing than it is an actual opinion. And then when you think about the editor is really the demand gen team. And so they're
Yep.
the ones that are orchestrating it and making sure, hey, what should we be talking about? What do we need to be talking about and being responsible for it and also be accountable for it? But you have this like separation. And so it's just been you think about like democratizing it. It's just marketing is more of an enabler and an amplifier. And the people are really the ones that drive the demand because they have the point of view that the company's never going to have.
I
Yeah,
hope
people,
everybody that's listening to this that's still sending out newsletters, this is the better way to do it, guys. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. Dax, go ahead.
yeah, people buy from people, man. There's always don't take it personal. It's just business. Yo, I'm a person. I'm gonna take it personal.
Yeah, it's basically what's always been in B2C is now happening to B2B. And so if you're not taking those similar tactics, you're going to lose.
Oh yeah, 100%. The concept of B2B is
So weird.
it's not
It's
really a
just
thing.
always business to human. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the reality. I always was thinking of I always had the mindset of if I sold toilets to businesses, like we just say, hey, you need like how many bathrooms you're gonna have? 50,000. I need 50,000 toilets. My toilets are still gonna be so dope. The box they come in, it's gonna be hot. They're gonna be like, oh man, do they have gear or shirts or something? Because I'm rocking this toilet brand. So you get it. But you talk about voices, and voices in a group are strong. So that's the perfect segue to the Hubolution. So heard of it, I've seen it. Clearly I've seen it. I'm on the internet. Tell us about where that came from, where it's going.
The Hubolution is a movement, is where I'd start. The Hubolution was designed to say, hey, this is going to take a ecosystem, not just one company. And so, yes, we may be the progenitors of that movement, but that's not like the intent was how do we create a whole movement around that that requires solutions partners, that requires app like Hapily's of the world and saying, hey, HubSpot really is the CRM platform for scaling companies. So you can either scale with or you can move on to HubSpot. And so for the whole point of view was it's no longer a feature issue, it's an education issue. And so we need to get united on this concept and really push that to market because it's that whole rising tides lifts all boats. If everyone is promoting that and providing that education that the CRO, for example, needs to hear, because there's such a Salesforce bias in the market or even a dynamics bias, depending on what industry you're talking about. But if they hear it not just from RP, but they hear it from Hapily and they hear it from Apollo and they hear it from Zoom, well, I shouldn't say Zoom Info because they're competitors, but the point is if you look at every single adjacent category to the CRM, and so what we said is, hey, let's get everyone. So let's go after CPQ. So let's, whether you're a Deal Hub partner or you're a Pandadoc partner as an example, or you go into commission tracking, so quota path, like how do we create these partnerships and then all come united with a similar message that we can promote to the market, because that's that whole 1+1 = 3 concept. But if we're all sharing it, then everybody benefits. And so that was the intent, is let's not hoard it. Let's actually bring everyone into that narrative.
Yeah, you can't fight a revolution without allies. Am I right? Going back to the people a little bit more. So Rob, when I was doing my little pre-interview with him, trying to get the dirt on you to get a good brief set up, he had told me about this operating philosophy that you guys have, and I don't want to butcher it. And if I wrote it down wrong, please don't kill me. But it was this idea of unlocking latent human potential for flourishing, which I thought was just a very beautiful statement, and it really warms my heart to know that you guys approach personal growth, professional growth of your employees in that way. Talk to me about how you guys deploy that operating philosophy and how it plays a role in the culture over there at RP.
I was wondering when Rob Jones would get into this conversation.
Yeah. I'll do him again after.
Yeah, we'll come back to Rob.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's actually the purpose statement of RP. And so yes, it is really romantic, but I think it's really what we desire. And so unlocking latent potential for human flourishing. A latent, just to double click on that word, latent by definition is unknown. And so what we want to do as an organization is come alongside our people, partner with our people so they experience what they don't see in themselves. And if we do that, then that's success for us as a business. And that could be career mobility, or that could just be belief in themselves. And there's a lot of ways that we could define that. But for us, that is when I see that happening, that means to me, that's my why. And when I see that, I get very excited. So Rob, we can actually come on to Rob, didn't make sense. But using Rob as an example, I think a lot of people maybe in this ecosystem know Rob's story, but if you don't,
where did he come from? Give us the lowdown on Rob.
Well, yeah, the long story is, or not the long story, the long history would be he and Matt Bullion were buddies growing up. But I didn't know Rob until Matt said, hey, I have this guy that you should talk to serve as an intern in your marketing department. And so Rob had been working in a fire department, and then he had been doing some door-to-door sales for telecommunications. So I just said, sure, he can be a marketing intern. That sounds great. And then he went into, we said, hey, he's actually doing pretty good here. What do you think he can do sales? And so he was actually our first sales rep. And then all of a sudden we saw that he was very creative and he started doing these videos.
One way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rob is, I think all that part of Rob, I think you actually know him personally, Max. I think the beautiful things about Rob is not only is he extremely talented, but the heart that guy has is a heart of gold. And so, but just seeing his progression from being an intern to now leading our demand gen team, but also just the voice he's created on social and the impact he's had on the market. The guy's doing selfies with Yamini, the CEO of HubSpot at Inbound, and getting access to her. It's been really cool to see It gets back to the belief, that latent
Yeah.
concept of Rob. While he's always self-effacing, I think he's starting to believe in himself and understand what others see in him and how talented he really is. But it's not just a Rob story. There are countless other stories I could get into of seeing that. So that's the heartbeat of RP. It gets back to that excellence
Yeah.
in care concept. There's a lot of ways that gets manifested inside of the business, but that's what we want for our people. It doesn't mean we're perfect. We fail a lot, but that's what we strive for.
Is there, if you could say one thing to a partner listening to this and they come across that philosophy of the unlocking latent human potential and they go, man, we are not doing that. What advice would you have for them to get started? What are some easier things that they can do to make sure they're at least starting to go in that direction?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one because if you don't have the foundation, then you are screwed. So it's
So maybe what's that then? Yeah.
So I would go back to, I don't know if you're familiar with Patrick Lencioni, but with somebody he's an author and a consultant that we really admire. And so there's the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And so there's 5 principles that he goes through. And the base foundation layer is trust. And if there's not
Right.
trust between the employer and employee, then that does not happen. And so that's where I'd start is you have to establish some form of trust through connection that allows for our peer to believe, or in this the employee
Sure.
to believe that you have their best interests at heart. Because if they view it just as, hey, you're cold, callous, and all you really care about is the bottom line, then why would I trust you with this? So, for example, we do feedback as a gift. That's one of our Slack channels, and it's all designed with that purpose statement. So, feedback as a gift is designed to say, well, the framework is start, stop, continue. And it's designed to say, hey, here's what I'm seeing, and I want to share that with you with the desire to call you up, not call you out. So, call up is very
Yeah.
just different than call out. So, because I believe in you, I want what's best for you. And so, we
Yeah.
do the start, stop, continue. And if you don't have that trust, then it's going to come across as calling out and really damnation versus, hey, we want to see you flourish.
Yeah, I think you mentioning feedback, it's such an important part of it. And I think oftentimes people are only focusing like a little bit too much on the negative specific feedback or what the shroud is constructive feedback oftentimes, and never really realizing that like constructive feedback can also be positive things that you observed, right? In certain situations that you want to, again, you said call people up instead of call them out. And I think that's one of the things that like we don't use feedback as a tool enough to say, hey, I saw that great thing that you did. If you continue to do that or did it in an even greater way, there's a lot of potential there that you could unlock in different scenarios. So yeah, I love that you guys are building a good culture of feedback, because that's where all the communication breaks down and growth completely stops, when like you haven't built a true culture of trust and feedback in your organization. And a lot of people just aren't good at giving or receiving, for that matter, any sort of feedback. So
Well, yeah, I think you guys are running a business, and I think it's to me, it's like a simple question: do you believe in me? Yes or no? And that's where the feedback is like, if I believe in you and I want what's best for you, and there's that trust understanding that exists, then you can engage in feedback in a really constructive way.
No, that's major, man. The feedback is everything because we are not in ourselves. We are a product of everything around us. And that product, which is us, we should look at the instructions. How are we built? How are we put together? How are we conformed? So I think that's man, you nailed it. I like this question about CRM as a product. I totally get it. Everything is a product to me. But how do you explain this to others that kind of looked at this thing that they have and they wanted to do something? How do you translate that message into people that are just using CRMs?
Yeah, I credit this to Matt Bullion, not to me. The thought behind this one is, well, this is factual. So I'll start with the facts. 50% of CRM implementations fail. So if that's the starting point, the question is why. And if you look at why do they fail, it's because they treat them as projects. And so it's looking at this waterfall implementation and so we just say that's the fundamental issue here. And so that's the root cause of why it's happening. So therefore, there must be a better way. And so if we take the agile methodology that you would apply to what you guys would do at Happily or any other product company, it's like, why can't that same concept exist for a CRM, not even for an implementation? And so we'll use words like product launch or MVP. And so that to us is really important, or it could be feature release. But the point is, you need to have the mindset that this is not a set it and forget it. Like the greatest good is adoption. And if you don't have those constant releases, then you're not going to drive that. And so it's a bit of a mindset shift. But those that get it really understand the impact that can have. So the question isn't if someone needs to own the CRM, it's who's going to own that on your behalf. And so that's really how we've positioned RP, is that we serve as your RevOps department, or more specifically, we own that HubSpot product on behalf of you. So if you're a CRO or
Mhm.
VP of sales, we are your partner. We're your chief of staff. And so instead of you having to figure out not only how to manage a sales team, but also be that product owner of HubSpot, we will serve that function for you.
Yeah. And I love this so much too, because if you think about it, a product evolves over time, right? A project just turns into another project later on, right? And you don't want to go through multiple projects just to have it fail and have to build up another one. And I think the other thing that's so interesting about it as well, it's especially for folks in a RevOps role, right? Like whether you guys are being that RevOps arm of a company, or you're supporting a RevOps team to then go deploy this for their own company, things like that. Look, the CRM is not just a product that you buy, it's a product that you end up producing and building, that your customer is like your coworkers, it's your different departments, right? And it's very much something that can be iterated and improved and evolve and do all these things over time, but it has to stay also consistent. So I love the way that you guys look at it, where it's just, listen, this is so much different than just, oh, we'll get it set up for you and we'll turn over the keys. It's okay, great. What happens when things change, right? What happens when things break? What happens when the business evolves or goes in a different direction, or we start to scale, right? And all of a sudden, the way we're using a CRM has to be looked at from a totally different perspective, right? Well, if it's a product that you're producing as the RevOps pros at that company, right, you're constantly thinking about, how can we make this thing better? How can we release new quote unquote features, right? Being the stuff that you're building to support the business, right? So I love the way that you guys look at that.
You're the business dynamic. And to your point,
Yeah.
so you may have a new product that you want to launch. You may have a new market that you want to go into. And
Mhm.
so how do you make sure that the CRM is set up in a way, or you're going to have new reps that come into place. And so there's always something, to your point. And so you need to treat it as such. And so it goes back to the point of view. And that's really allowed us to be successful.
Yeah. I want to hit on this last thing is I've seen you on LinkedIn a lot. These videos that you share that seem to be, I don't know what you call them, but to me, they look like these weekly, internally at first, like reflections that you're sending out. Cause you always start with, hey, our peers, even though it's a video you're putting out to the world. And I've seen you over time put these videos out there, give people like an idea of what's actually happening at the company. And oftentimes, like sometimes you're not sharing the best news, right? And you're being extremely transparent. I love the transparency there, but I want to know what's the calculus like behind that, of being willing to put everything out there in the world and show the world how you're communicating with your company and practicing that radical transparency. What's the reasoning behind that? Like, why do you do it? Because a lot of people would be too scared to do some stuff like that, or too proud to do some stuff like that. But you guys put it all out there. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it wasn't. I forgot about this question. So
Yeah.
I was encouraged to do it. I think that's probably the starting
Rob made
point.
me do it.
Uh, yeah, I think, look, what's model's repeated, and I think if it's what I expect of other people, then I need to demonstrate it. So I think that was a gut check of it. I think there's also not necessarily how do we do it differently, because there are people that do that, but it's just like, hey,
Mhm.
what's my belief system, and and I want people to hear that. And we're full. Like, the other reality is we're fully remote, so the thought was like, how do people make sure they see me and experience me? So we definitely have rhythms for team meetings and whatnot, but as we continue to scale, my access to people diminishes. And so it's important that they
Yeah.
understand what's on my mind, what am I thinking about. And I also just I've had bad experiences with employers, and it doesn't mean that RP is perfect. But what I said is, hey,
Yeah.
if I can when I say control, it's a very strong word. But if I
Yeah.
have the ability to influence how a company is designed, then I'm going to over-index to transparency. And so I
Yeah.
told you at the very beginning of this podcast, like Q1 was rocky, and it's been a challenging season of how do we navigate this well, because we talk about excellence and care, and it may not feel very caring when we have to make really hard decisions on like people, for example. But like how to like this a concept again. It's not by if you over-index on care, then you suffer from mediocrity. And if you go too far in excellence, then you become a place that you don't want to work. And so what we're trying to do is how do we invite, at least my intent is how do I invite our peers into the conversation? It doesn't mean it's easy. In fact, it's really hard. And to your point, it's uncomfortable. But it also gives our peers a sense of visibility and control, and they can engage in it and say, hey, how can I impact some of these things? And so we found, I'm learning, by the way. So like we are what I found recently is that people appreciate that. Doesn't mean it's
Mhm.
easy or that, hey, I agree with some of the things, but at least gives them an awareness that I think oftentimes people shy away from it, or CEOs shy away from it. And I don't want to, I don't ever want to get in that position. And so, yeah, feel free to ask more, but that's some of the initial thoughts.
No, it just takes a lot to be human. As people are born human, but they don't want to be human. If that makes sense. Not every man will die, but not every man lives. So I'm akin to that, where you just be you and be, yeah, bad things do happen to people. Good things happen to people. Here is my explanation so that you don't have to do those things, or you can learn from my mistakes or learn from my greatness, whatever the soup du jour, right? So I think that's huge, man. Well, Brendan, this has been a pleasure. I appreciate you coming on Bill
Yeah.
Happily. We always like to do this fun thing at the end. Ask 3 random questions you weren't ready for. Max gave me a little bit of spiel. He said he got the keys to the bakery. So I have to ask something about baking some bread.
Yeah, that's a plug-in from Rob. I know that one for sure. Okay, go ahead.
What is the hardest thing that you've had to bake? The most
Ooh.
difficult baking item?
Yeah, I love baking, which is weird, but I really do. I would
Kinda
say
weird.
I'm very domesticated. So I would say sourdough bread is the hardest thing to make.
Sourdough?
It's more time intensive, but I'm not a very patient person, so I'll go with sourdough.
There's a lot of chemistry there, though, too. All baking's chemistry, right? But like sourdough, I think in particular, there's like a lot of variables.
Yeah, I avoid sourdough as much as possible. I
What
love
is-
sourdough, but it's
What's
just
your favorite savory baked good?
savory. Probably a jalapeno cheddar biscuit.
Ooh. Can I give a quick shout out to they used to have ham and cheese squares at Starbucks?
Their sausage sandwiches or sausage, egg, and cheese sandwiches are really good, but also there's probably healthier. The egg bites, which don't sound sexy,
Yes.
but they are tasty.
You can get them at Costco now.
My wife told me that, but she said they're not cheap, so I don't know.
Probably not. Starbucks.
It's probably the thing. That's funny. So last one is, so if you like to bake so much, what do you hate? What do you hate baking besides sourdough? What is, man? If you bake
Uh,
me these meal, dude, if you don't get out of my house right now.
I love eating it, but cookies, it sounds weird, but like cookies, it's just a lot of work for. It doesn't maybe it shouldn't sound like a lot of work, but I have some cheat codes, but cookies would be my. I love eating cookies, and my family does too. So usually every Saturday morning, I'll make waffles or biscuits or something for the family, and then cookies. But the cookies they take a lot of work, and but I always go, I'm glad I did it. So, but
Yeah.
one I don't enjoy making.
Way to be diplomatic about it, because you went through this whole episode being this great guy, and then you were the guy that said, I hate baking cookies.
I love
You know,
eating cookies. I don't
You
like
balanced
baking
it very well, so you saved
Cats. I don't want to see a cat ever. I will kick cat.
Yeah, I hate
Cookies,
dogs and cats and kids.
yeah, animals, no. Cookies, no. Revenue, yeah, we're good with that. So,
Hell
but Brian,
yeah.
it's a pleasure, dude. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having us in your life, in your day. This is awesome. So, until the next one, man, where can we find you? Trick question.
Find me or the rest of RP online. That's probably a good place to start. But hey, thanks for what y'all are doing for the ecosystem. We talked about the Hubolution. We had
Yeah.
that whole Hubolutionaries Unite. So thanks for what you guys are doing, and let's keep building together.
That's
We're
the
all in
game.
it together, man. Thank you, Brendan.
T-shirt,
See ya.
man.